Hello friends, today I am going to explain to you what is state and how to use it in React applications. So, what is state and why do we need it? The state is a plain JavaScript object. It is an observable variable that helps us to control the behavior of the React component. In other words, the state of the component is an object that holds some information that may change over the lifetime of the React component, and that information can be in type of string, object, array, integer, etc. If you change the state value, then the render method will be called automatically and the UI will reflect at the client side. So we can change the layout of the HTML based on the value of the state change. Now we have two methods to change the state value. Let's take one by one. You can change the state value by using two different methods. So I'm going to talk about method 1, where you can see here the set state methods contain the two different parameters. First one is the object which help us to update the state value, and the second one is an optional method. It's called after state has been updated. Now let's talk about the method 2. So method 2 is slightly different than the first one. It contains a function as a parameters which provide us the previous state and the props of the component, and based on it we can update the state variable. We'll see both methods via example. This another things that I want to share you, like the set state is the asynchronous method. So please be careful during the updation of the state. Let's take an example where we will create a React component that help us to increase and decrease the number of the counter on button click and display that counter in the label. We have already posted a video to create a React applications using create react app. I have added the video link in the description box. You can watch it later. I'm going to remove the existing code from the app.js. Here you can see one basic setup is already there, and I'm now removing the whole unnecessary contents from the app file. This application is already started in my systems, and also over here the logo is not required. So the first things, here you can see the app is a functional component, so we need to update, we need to convert it into a class component. So for that I'm just writing a component. It's coming from the React library. Now let's remove whole things and write the class and extend component. Okay, so it has a render methods. Render method have written the HTMLs. I'm going to return one HTML as a div, sorry, and define the class name as a app. For testing I'm adding the state in React. Okay, let's check in browser. Okay, good, it's working. Now I'm going to remove a few unnecessary css from the file because it's not required. So let's remove it. So it's also not required, and adding the margin as a 20 pixel or 30 pixel as you want. Okay, now let's focus on the state functionality. So to implement the demo, I'm just trying to split whole example in three parts. First, we need to define the state in the constructor. Then after the write some HTMLs, and then in third part we add the some logic of the increment or decrement logic methods. So now add the constructor over here. So first things, if you want to define the state variable, definitely you need to write a constructor, and over there you can define the state variable. In new version, you can also define the state without constructor as well. But I'm going to use the constructor for now. So use the constructor props, and here I'm writing the super. So super will call the constructor of the parent class. So that's why I have written over here, and it's required. So another things like how we can define the state variable. So for that we need to use this dot state, and then after it's a object. Over here whatever variable you write it, it's automatically defined as a state variable. So for now I'm using the counter as a 0. So if you want to define a normal variable for this class component, definitely you can define it over here, like whatever xyz you want to do it, and it should be like you can define any value 102, any string that you want, or if you want to define uh, if you want to assign the boolean value, then you can do it. But for now I'm not going to focus on these variables. Okay, now this counter is displayed properly. So let's display the counter. For that I'm writing the counter, and uh, trying to I'm trying to fetch the counter from the state variable. So for that you can write this dot state dot counter. Okay, let's check in browser. Yes, good. You can see the counter is coming over here. So for this demo purpose, let me add a few more button to increase and decrease the counter. So I'm going to add the div, and inside that we'll define the button. So for now, increment by 1, and also add the another button is decrement by 1. So also I'm trying to add few inline style. You can define the class variables and uh, write style in css as well. It's all up to you, but for now I'm using the inline style. So I'm also adding one more style in button, margin right as a 10, it's fine. Okay, so yes, you can see it's look like this. So now what I need to do in next, when I click on increment button and decrement button, at the time we need to increment or decrement the counter. So for that let's have two different methods called increment and decrement on. So I am writing the methods on click is dot handles. You can write any name for the methods, it's all up to you. For now I'm using handle increment. So let's create methods for handle increment. I'm using the arrow functions because it's the latest one. You can write the normal function as well, but for that you have to bind the method in constructor. Okay, so same things, I'm also taking one more method to decrement the value. This dot handle. Okay, use this method over here. Great. Now we have two methods. So let's try to increment or decrement the value of the counter. So for that we need, right now I'm using the first method of the state variable. So it's something like this dot set state, and then after providing the counter, and this counter variable will increase by using the previous counter from the state by adding the +1. It's some things like this. Same things I'm using use this logic, but just decrease the counter by -1. Okay, so it's look like this. Let's check the output. Okay, good, it's working. Now this one is the first methods. Let's take an example of the second method. For that, I'm going to add one more button to increment the counter by 2. So using this, just copy these buttons by 2. Just define new methods. We can also use the same method to increment the counter by 2 by passing the parameters, but for understanding I'm going to use the second methods over here. So I have created the handle increment to another methods for second button. So let me remove the style and adding in previous buttons so it's looks cool. Okay, great, it's looking perfect. Let's write the logic to increment the counter by 2. So I'm using this same logic over here, but what I need to do it, I need to add the 2. So let's check it here. Yes, you can see it's working properly. Now let's try to understand the first method. So I'm just slightly use this first logic twice. It's the same thing, like in first line I'm incrementing the value of the counter, and the second line again do same things to increment again. So it's like you can assume that we are going to increment the counter by 2 by executing the first command twice. So let's check these things. I'm saving this file and let's check it. Oh, you can see it's only increment by 1. So what happened over here? First things, when this method will call at a time react means set, we are calling the set state method to update the counter. So as you know, the set state method is asynchronous. That means in second line it might be it's not updated in the state variables. So that's why we when we are trying to fetch the state variable, then it's a older value. So by default you can see over here might becomes 0 in the state variables, like counter value is 0, first time it's 0. By adding +1 it should be a 1, but it will take little bit time because it's asynchronous. But when this method will execute at a time, also same things will happen, like counter value also at a time counter value might be 0 plus 1. So this will return the 1 again. So that's why it's coming the 1. Now how we can fix these things? As you know, we have a callback function in state variable, so we can use that function. This function will execute when the first value is updated. I mean to say the state variable is updated via first methods. So I'm using the callback functions. Once it like first counter is updated, then and then I'm calling the second counter increment. So what happened? Let's check it. Cool, it's working fine. So now let me give you a example of the another methods. So with the another methods we can definitely do it. So over there, like I'm just commenting the first code, and let's try to write the second methods. Second method is some things like this, where we have one function. That functions contain the previous state and the props, but I am only using the previous state over here, and these functions will return the whole object. That object contains the state variable. So for now I'm updating the counter variable, and for now I'm using the previous state dot counter plus 1. Okay, so this will increase the first, and again I am going to use the same logic in second line. So definitely this will work properly as we want. So what happened over here, when this line is executed at the time, the logic is it's try to fetch the counter value from the previous state. So our previous state, like first time it's 0, and it's try to increase the value by 1, and immediately when we are calling the second method is also try to fetch the counter value from the previous state. So that means once this first counter is updated, then and then you can get the previous value over here. So that means this will work fine. We don't need to use the callback functions, and yes, in the method too we don't have a callback function. So like now, uh, you have questions when we need means when we need to use method 1 and when we need to use method 2. So let's say if you have state variable that you want to update based on the existing state. For now you can see we are updating the counter variable based on the our state, this state counter variable. So at the time we need to use this second methods because it's very safe to execute this method. But if you want to update the state variables that not depends on this our defined any defined state variables like counter and any other things, then definitely you can use the first methods. So that's the major difference between two methods. So make sure while you are working with the React applications, so this one is the major difference between two methods. I hope this one is clear in your mind. So you can also find the same explanations in my site. It's cluemediator.com. Over there we have written the article state in reactjs. So same things we have explained in details over here, and also provide the example where you can manage the increment and decrement counters over here. And also we are managing the source in the git repository that you can refer it. Okay, then like, share and subscribe us. Thank you.